Happy Thursday, everybody. It's a gorgeous day outside. I don't know if you guys are inside or outside. We're already inside, obviously, getting ready to start with some sports talk for your Thursday. I'm joined by my radio brother, my co-host of the amazing show Alarm After Hours that I know you all listen to on Sirius XM on Friday nights, Justin Fensterman. What's up, Justin?
What's up, sis? How you doing? Happy Thursday.
Happy Thursday. Usually I only get to have one-on-one time with you on Friday, but now we get to have this time together on Thursday afternoon. How awesome is that?
Oh, it's so awesome. And anytime I get a chance to hang with you, we just have that natural chemistry going like a brother and sister. Like I told you, Jen, I treat you exactly like I treat my sister, for better or for worse, depending on who you ask between me and my sister. But it's always great hanging with you. And our Friday conversations are just always so much fun. And hopefully with us getting sports back and these live sports coming back of our core sports, it's time to dominate. There's no other option. You know that.
It's so true. And let's go ahead and kick off with some, I don't know, is this news anymore? A new tweet came out 30 seconds ago. Last night I was getting excited. I don't know if you were getting excited. Rob Manfred went and said we had a productive meeting. I went in person, Tony Clark and I face to face. We're going to agree the framework involves 60 games. We want to get baseball back on the field. And then immediately afterward, the MLBPA tweeted and said, there's no deal. It's not going on. This morning, we get reports that the Players Association countered and said, hey, let's make it 70 games and some share of the, postseason. Now, of course, they weren't really going to go for it, but I was feeling pretty positive that at least this means we're in the ballpark, right? I mean, we did some math, and those 10 games equal about $245 million. That's basically Manny Machado's entire contract. In the broad scheme of things, not that big of a deal, right? But John Heyman just tweeted out moments ago, owners are not responding positively to players' counter proposal. Owners believe they'd had a meeting of the minds, and the number was 60 games. So I've asked this question on Twitter. I didn't prep you for this, but what does MLB stand for, Justin?
Man, I actually saw you tweet this out. So I was going to say, man, MLB, how about this? To make you happy, Major Lousy Bananas. How about that? There you go. See, I win the crowd with that one, Jen.
You totally did. The banana drop. I mean, how are you feeling? Do you still think baseball's going to be played? I mean, we were on the roundtable on Tuesday with Jim Bowden. Obviously, Jim Bowden is very dialed in. He says there's a 99.9% chance we're having baseball this season. I really want to believe that. How do you feel, Justin?
I still think there's going to be a baseball season. The fact that they're still talking, it's an ongoing negotiation, as Ronas has said to us a few times, is that at least they are talking. That's the big thing. It would be more troubling if a full week goes by, especially nowadays with the quarantine and every day being an eternity. It would be more concerning to me if a week goes by and we haven't heard anything yet. And that would be a bit more alarming, pun intended, to me. So with that, I still think, and I've always thought there was going to be a season. And some people are turned off by a potential 50 to 60 game season. I'm not. At this point, why be picky? We just want our core sports back. And we have certain environmental factors working against us constantly. I'll take whatever I can get. Hell, I'll take 20 games, Jen Piacent. I just want baseball back at this point. I love watching live sports. And all this going on, and I talked about it on Alarm After Hours last night with Ronas, it made me kind of think of it from a nostalgic standpoint here, how I fell in love with sports and what sports means to me and my life. And it almost brings a tear to my eye, literally just talking about it, because I love sports and I have identified myself with sports. We talk about handcuffs in fantasy sports and fantasy football. To me, my life handcuff has always been sports. When I was down about whatever it was in school, high school, anything social, a girl broke up with me, and believe it or not, and you might not believe this, that happened pretty regularly.
No way.
No, I know, right? I'm shocked too. Please.
You're a genius.
Exactly. You know it. But I took sports as my handcuff. Sports always was that teddy bear to me that made me feel better and secure. And not having it these last few months has really made me evaluate my life. And I knew I loved sports before, but now looking on it, Jen, you could maybe tell me how you first fell in love with sports.
Yeah.
I just miss it so much, and I'll take whatever I can get, like the old Facebook status.
Yeah, for me, I'm without sports and I'm without the arts. For me, it was theater and things like that, as well as sports. And I first fell in love with sports just from going to watch my dad and my uncles play. And it was just a nostalgic feeling. It felt good. It felt like summer. It felt happy. And it just felt like, hey, when you were on the ball field, everything was just fine. Time kind of stopped, And that was before we were all on text all the time and all of this too. So you really did stop and watch the game. Speaking of, though, did you happen to see that documentary Long Gone Summer yet?
I did, and that really, if I thought I missed baseball before,
I
man,
know.
And it's not
Same.
because, people are like, oh, steroids. No, that's not what it was about for me. It was about just watching the joy of players hitting home runs. That's just how much, when you think of baseball, what's one of the best parts about baseball? Watching players hit home runs and seeing where the ball lands and seeing home run after home run and the race between McGwire and Sosa. And also my guy, my favorite baseball player of all time, Ken Griffey Jr., who drove my interest of the sport of baseball. And by the way, MLB Network this Sunday, I forget the time, is actually going to have a special on Ken Griffey Jr. So I will make sure I will be watching that as well. It made me miss baseball even more, just seeing myself at these games and all the home runs that I've witnessed, even from pitchers like Dontrell Willis hitting grand slams with me live there. I love Long Gone Summer. What about you?
Same for me. I absolutely adored it. You get in, you're 5 minutes in, and I'm just sitting there thinking, oh my gosh, how are we going to live without this as a country? It is still kind of America's sport, And I was thinking about how international it is. You got Sammy Sosa from the Dominican Republic, originally a shoe shine boy, coming out and challenging, all-American Southern California guy, Mark McGwire. How fantastic is that? And the international aspects of baseball, Korea has an incredible baseball league, Japan, Latin America, all over the world, Cuba, all over the world. And I think that that's one of the unique things. Sure, we play basketball all over the world, but like football, American football is really just American. I think baseball has the biggest influence worldwide as far as tradition, American tradition goes, and people having that dream to come play. And just watching Sammy Sosa was so joyful, watching his joy and watching the fans and their joy when Mark McGwire would hit. And I know, again, like you said, the steroids thing at the end, but one interesting thing they brought up is, well, first of all, when they were doing it, there weren't clear rules in place. So we can debate all of this again about like how fair was it with the steroids and whether things should be qualified or not. But, everyone was doing it. Again, this was a situation after a strike, right? In '94, MLB gave a big screw you to fans as far as fans felt, right?
Right.
Then this came along so perfectly. And can you stage a better show? St. Louis and Chicago, right there, like a few hours away, rivals in the National League with this home run battle. Absolutely incredible. That really brought a lot of fans back to the sport. So if they do this again, how are we going to do it? How are we going to bring fans back to the sport? Are we going to have another miracle? I certainly hope so. It has been done before, but we're going to need another situation where we have a real resurgence, something that brings excitement back into the game.
Absolutely. And it might be another home run battle. It might actually be the next wave of talent next year. If you have a lot of those rookies and second year guys that are standing out, I think that will help as well. And, I've talked to a lot of people, a lot of my friends, they go, Fensty, sports, they're not going to be as interesting without fans, right? And I say wrong. As long as we have the sport, that's what's important. Out of sight, out of mind. And that's the big deal when it came to the '94 strike. It was when you don't see something for about 5 to 6 weeks, all of a sudden you forget about it because you're used to seeing it on TV. So that's why I'm personally really pushing that baseball just figures it out. Whether it's 50 games or not, yes, I would love it to be more. But at the same time, 50 games, I'll take it because that, I think, will in a way save the sport. Now, when it comes to fantasy, that's a different story. For me, I don't know, again, why are we being so picky? I'm still going to play. It might not be my most competitive league because there are a lot more variables, and we always have to account for variable change in life and in fantasy sports. And without the full season, we can't sit on our players as much. But aren't we desperate to just get some fantasy sports back? And that's where I think we all have to get out of our heads. And we can't just have such a specific order and vision as to what we're looking for. If it's a 50-game season, it's a 50-game season. And let me just tell you this, Jen, and this is something that I actually told Ronas that I was proud about, and I think it was on our Table That discussion yesterday. I was very proud of Ronas because Ronas has been Mr. Roto League, but he was able to understand that there are people out there that love head-to-head, and even though he probably didn't want to do it, he figured out a way, just like I did, but he figured out a way where you could still play in a head-to-head format, but warned you of the probably sixth of the season that's going to be chopped off for playoffs. But where there's a will, there's a way. And if it's 50 games, if it's 30 games, I want to find a way to play fantasy sports. I love sports. Fantasy sports made that love a hell of a lot more, made my heart that much bigger. And why not play fantasy sports if the sport presents itself?
Well, one interesting thing about playing fantasy sports, even if it's only for 50 games, is, first of all, it's going to be a new game. It's going to be fun. By the way, we released our NFL draft guide last week. You guys go get it. It's on sale right now. I believe it's half price, so you really can't miss that. That's ridiculous. And with that, you get the MLB draft guide, the Jim Bowden draft guide, for free. So this is not going to cost you anything to play as far as education. We're going to have everything for you. We're going to be working hard. Once we get a deal in place, and we do believe there will be one, we will figure out the best ways we think you can win, even in a shortened season. But one thing about fantasy sport that's so great is that you actually do learn a lot more than just about your team. And that's kind of where I want to go with my next question to you, Justin. And it also touches on something that you said, the future of the sport, the young players that might come forward. Well, we only have 5 rounds of MLB draft, right? So how are we doing ourselves a disservice? What's going to happen? And there was this article that recently came out, which made me think of you because you are a Mets fan, in AM New York just a few days ago, saying, a source close to the Wilpons, I know, big shocker, says, they're going to lose so much money this year. Why are they going to put a lot of money into the team next year? They're not. They're just going to try to sell the team fire sale. And so I guess my question is, how do you feel? This kind of happened to me, like as an Astros fan with all the Astros scandal. Like, as a fan, are you so loyal to your team? And why? Or are you more loyal to your fantasy team? Just playing fantasy help you appreciate more players? Just talk to me a little bit about team loyalty versus fantasy loyalty.
Sure. And Jen, I don't really like to talk about this too much because on fantasyalarm.com and even SiriusXM as well, we cover all the teams. So I never want you to think, and I promise everyone, I will never, ever have a bias towards the teams I grew up rooting for.
Me too.
Every team has to be accounted for. That's the bottom line. When you're a national radio show or you're a site that covers every single team, then you can't have any bias whatsoever. I know people that play fantasy sports that are huge Yankee fans that won't draft Red Sox. I think that's ridiculous. I think that's terrible strategy. I think that's taking away opportunities that you have based off draft value. So when it comes to my teams and the teams that I root for, at this point, Jen, I'm 33. I have never won a championship. I'm from New York. I grew up on Long Island. None of my teams, since I've been alive, have ever won a championship. I don't know that feeling. I grew up rooting for the New York Knicks, the New York Mets, the New York Islanders, and the New York Jets. That's who I grew up. Talk about the loser New York teams. Not the Giants, not the Yankees. Those other teams. So I've never seen a championship. So at this point, even with terrible ownership with the Mets and the Knicks, why get off the boat now? If I'm going to be a long-standing fan, that's what being a fan's all about. For some have easier times. Some teams just go to the finals every year or go deep into the playoffs every year. I grew up in New York, the biggest market in the country, and my teams have never won a championship. So because of that, I'm pretty grounded when it comes to my own team's fandom because I don't know that feeling, what it's like to win a championship. I've never experienced it. Now, from the fantasy side, Jen, have you ever seen a movie called A Bronx Tale?
Oh yeah, and I've seen the musical.
Okay,
as well.
Very, very nice. You probably started it. So for A Bronx Tale, there was a line that taught me a lot about separating business from personal, and that's where one of the Chaz Palminteri says that tells the kid who's a huge Mickey Mantle fan. He says, "Well, Mickey Mantle doesn't care about you. Mickey Mantle doesn't pay your rent." Well, to me, my fantasy teams pay my rent. My fantasy teams, when I win, pay my bills. They allow me to eat. They allow me to enjoy the extras. And with that, that's business. And I don't mix business and personal, meaning that if it comes down to it where I have to root for one of my two teams, let's say I have a bunch of players on my fantasy team facing the team that I'm rooting for, the Knicks, Jets, Mets, and Islanders aren't paying my rent. When I sign that dotted line, when I hit that login button to join a fantasy sports league, that's the team I'm committed to. That's the team that's going to pay dividends for me. And that's why I tell everybody out there, if you can't separate that, you shouldn't be playing fantasy sports. And I know we shouldn't say that on fantasyalarm.com, but that's the truth of the matter. You have to go all in. That's your team. So for me, it's not hard at all. I prioritize my fantasy teams over the teams that I root for in sports.
I would say generally I do as well, though I will say that sometimes it's frustrating to be almost feel like I have to root against my home team for my fantasy team to win when those situations come up. I don't like that feeling. So I do try to get one or two players that I really like from my home team just so I can have a piece of it. But I'm the same way, and people always assume I'm going to bid up Astros and I'm actually not that person. I don't do it. I don't drink the Kool-Aid of my team being better than everybody else's. But I do draft value. And this year I do have more Astros than ever before because I feel that I'm getting a lot of value because of things that have happened and that people don't want to have them for emotional reasons. Like you were talking about, people that don't want to have Astros because they cheated. And I understand that. I get that. But I believe they didn't cheat in 2019. I believe Alex Bregman did have a real MVP season. And so I believe if I can get him in the 5th round, like I just did in the MLB NFL combo draft, why wouldn't I take him? I can play him at short. I can play him at third. He could potentially have another MVP season. Then I'm going to take a player. And then I'm happy about it because then when I watch my home team, I can kind of root for him at the same time.
And that's fine.
But enough of MLB.
And that's fine. I just want to say one thing as well on the other side of that. Last year, and John Impemba, who's producing this broadcast, knows what I'm talking about here. Last year, when Yahoo Fantasy Basketball opened up, I saw the Knicks center, Mitchell Robinson, ranked 23rd overall. I freaked out. It was a Saturday night, and I completely freaked out. I emailed all of our NBA guys on staff. I emailed Impemba. I emailed James Grande. I believe it was at least them two that I emailed, and I said, guys, we have to get something out right now. Something. I'm about to blow a gasket. Because, yes, it's a Knicks player, and yes, I root for the Knicks, but it's a Knicks player that was ranked way too high, whose blocks were so overrated of the rest of his fantasy value. A top 25 player to a guy who couldn't stay out of foul trouble, to a guy who barely played over 23 minutes a game the previous season. So I had to get some audio out there on the site to just warn people, do not draft this guy in the 2nd round. It infuriated me. It frustrated me. And and that's how it works the other way as well. Because for those that weren't familiar with a guy like Mitchell Robinson, they didn't realize it. But Yahoo has them as the default rankings. And Jen, that's why I want to continue to say, now that we're getting closer to football redraft season, we're already talking best ball. You can't rely on default rankings. Right. I used to help the NFBKC with Greg Ambrosius, Tom Kesenick. I used to help them with their default rankings. You know when they wanted those rankings? They wanted those rankings in June, prior to the NBA draft. Good for them for staying organized. They're staying on top of it. They know once you get that itch, you got to give your audience a chance to scratch. But at the same time, it's 4 or 5 months out. So with that being 4 or 5 months out, if you are not getting to your draft room and organizing your queue, looking at that default rankings that's sometimes, and when I say sometimes, I mean a lot of the time, isn't updated at all from when it's submitted, then you are doing it wrong. You can't rely on default rankings. Your queue, those are your rankings and tiers.
I am 100% with you. And that's why you are going to check out things like the fantasyalarm.com draft guide, because we're going to help you be able to update your queue. I've already been in some best ball drafts and some other drafts for NFL, and the rankings they're not updated for NFL. MLB, who knows? We're going to have to redo all of those based on new strategy. Let's actually talk about NFL for a second. We have a survey right now on Fantasy Alarm. And this actually kind of ties into default rankings and perception and perceived value and who has helium and who doesn't. And we're asking about which rookie running back you think will make the most impact. So the options were Jonathan Taylor, DeAndre Swift, Cam Akers, and J.K. Dobbins. And as of right now, Jonathan Taylor is running away with it at 41.5% of the vote. Justin, what do you think? Is this too high?
Yes, it is. And it scares me. And that shows that people aren't doing enough research into these running backs and the backfields that they're in. I mean, Jen, you talked about this even on draft night when we did our coverage together there. All of a sudden, all these running backs land in spots where the team had a running back already. So those dominant 3-down backs are all of a sudden becoming extinct like dinosaurs. And as scary as that is, we now have to realize that. So you're going to tell me with Jonathan Taylor, Marlon Mack is still there. And I try not to listen to every headline I read. I try not to believe everything I read from beat reporters. I try to find coaches' info, but we don't have training camp yet or anything like that to determine it. Do people just forget that Marlon Mack is there still? Do people even forget that Nyheim Hines is also still there, who months ago team beat reporters of the Colts were saying that he's going to have a bigger role? So how is that all going to work out? And the receiving options as well. Michael Pittman Jr. I'd much rather go after him if I'm targeting someone from the Colts than pay second round value for Jonathan Taylor. It's too murky. And if you look at some of the other options, I mean, Swift, how can you trust? I mean, they still have Kerryon Johnson, so I can't trust Swift in that regard. Dobbins, people seem to be very confident in Dobbins and his ability, but they were saying very similar things about Justice Hill the year before when he was the shiny new toy. Now he's forgotten about. They have 4 running backs in Baltimore. Cam Akers is my guy. I do not believe in Darrell Henderson, Malcolm Brown, anyone else. Cam Akers, yes, I can't compare him to Todd Gurley, even though he's taking essentially Todd Gurley's role. We know that Todd Gurley, with his arthritic knee, didn't have a lot of yards, but had a hell of a lot of touchdowns. This guy is going to break tackles. I think if there's any of these rookies that are going to be the 3-down back, especially on this poll, it's definitely Cam Akers. And when it comes to draft value, if I can grab this guy in the 4th round every single draft I'm in, and I'm sure by the time August hits, he'll move up to the 3rd round, I'll still pay for him as my second running back in that 3rd round. But when it comes to Jonathan Taylor, it's too murky right now. And that's why with the uncertainty, and especially with the asking price of him, like 2nd round, I can't risk it like that in the 2nd round when I'm trying to grab cornerstones for my fantasy football team.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've all admitted now that, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, he probably is someone you should target early, just getting any piece of that Kansas City offense, even if he only plays, half of it, is still going to put up bonkers PPR numbers for you because that powerful offense is just incredible. Any piece of that's going to be valuable. Jonathan Taylor, DeAndre Swift, Cam Akers, J.K. Dobbins all go to potential platoons. But Cam Akers, to me as well, seems like the one that has the clearest path to, 3-down activity. Now, I do understand, though, what's going on with Jonathan Taylor. I mean, I think it's very easy to look at what happened with Austin Eckler and say, but look, Phillip Rivers, yeah, sure, you can argue like Michael Pittman's a great value. And I love Michael Pittman. He's my favorite rookie wide receiver right now. I've drafted him already late. But Phillip Rivers has no chemistry with any of those guys. Right?
Right.
Any of them. So he's new. It might be Pittman. It might be T.Y. Hilton. It might be Paris Campbell. It might be Jonathan Taylor. It might be even Marlon Mack. Who knows? But they do have a great O-line, and they do have a way to run the ball. So the question is Phillip Rivers going to turn Jonathan Taylor into the next Austin Eckler? I think that's what people are thinking here.
And it's possible. But again, Marlon Mack can help out in that regard as well. Nyheim Hines can also help out.
Nyheim Hines, yep.
If we're talking towards the end of the season, great. But what about, and that's great for all of you when you're in weeks 13, 14, 15, if you make it there, if you make the playoffs. And that's right. Again, it's a second round pick. I'd like there to be a little bit more certainty with that, Jen. And by the way, Jen, I want to give some breaking news that I'm seeing over the last about half hour. Deebo Samuel has a broken foot. So I'm seeing that right now. And apparently he's having surgery. As we're talking, I'm looking into it right now. So with that, I don't know where that's going to bring him. I mean, could he be done? It's potentially, I'm seeing that, according to Ian Rappaport, if you don't mind me reading the report quickly, that he broke his foot during a throwing session and it's a Jones fracture, as Ian Rappaport is being called. He should, apparently, according to Ian Rappaport, so take that as you will, should be able to be on the field early in the season. But what can that mean? Brandon Ayuk, all of a sudden, later on, talk about rookies.
Skyrocketing.
Yeah.
You guys are in best ball. Go right now. Start a league and take your shot there, because this is the time to do it before everybody starts reading everything. You guys that have already got the info, now's the time to go play your best balls and get that information that you have before everyone starts inflating these rookies, and go grab Brandon Ayuk. I recently, when you were talking about Marlon Mack, to go back to that, I'm in this combo MLB NFL draft for SiriusXM. And I think in round 15, I took Marlon Mack. For exactly what you were saying, I think there's no way Marlon Mack isn't just going to disappear. Okay, he's not just going to go away. He had 1,000 yards rushing last year. He's still a good running back, right? Is Jonathan Taylor more talented? Yeah, he is. But that doesn't mean he's immediately going to step into that role. So I had also drafted Clyde Edwards-Helaire as my number one running back because of a series of getting, Michael Thomas and then needing to go MLB, et cetera. But I thought to myself, hey, even if Clyde Edwards-Helaire gets a slow start or they don't use him right away, I've probably got Marlon Mack for the first 4 to 5 weeks of the season. So there's just a lot of ways. Don't just completely, write off Marlon Mack. Don't completely write off Kerryon Johnson yet. I think DeAndre Swift actually might have even more opportunity than Jonathan Taylor at the beginning of the season, if I'm picking.
Right, and especially when you look at weapons as well. I mean, short dump-off passes do count, and you want a running back, especially if they're going to be a little bit active in the passing game, you want fewer weapons. So with that, I mean, yes, in terms of Swift, that could benefit him, that could help him. I just, again, and I try not to take last year and bring it to this year. I was in the Kerryon Johnson business last year, and it was very, very difficult. He got hurt. He's been banged up. But with that, again, it's just so uncertain, and it's not like the Lions don't have other options. I mean, they got great weapons in Kenny Golladay. They also have Marvin Jones, who's at an incredible value right now when it comes to fantasy. This is a guy that you could get in the 8th or 9th round. That's amazing value. And even TJ Hawkinson should be able to help out with the production as well. So there's just so much uncertainty. And when it comes to paying a second-round pick, to me, Jen, it's different when you're spending a 4th-round pick than a second-round pick. I like to get myself cornerstones early that I've seen it before. I know it's going to happen. And yes, has it robbed me of certain rookie running backs in the past? Absolutely. But we've seen other guys not work out as well. So with that, it just makes me feel good going after those cornerstones. And especially if later on I want to take some risks with my draft, I like to be a little bit safer early on.
Now, you guys, we want to know what you think. We're going to retweet this, but also go to Fantasy Alarm's Twitter account and vote. Who do you think is going to be the rookie running back with the most impact? Jonathan Taylor, DeAndre Swift, Cam Akers, J.K. Dobbins, and tell us why. We love having these conversations with you guys. That's what we're here for. It's fun for us. We're missing sports. We know they're coming back. Obviously, you guys, please take note of that note that Justin just read. Deebo Samuel has injured his foot and is going to need surgery. So it could be a few games into the season before you see Deebo Samuel, meaning Brandon Ayuk may have just gotten a bit of a bump. And of course, we know San Francisco loves their running game. So that's even more excitement for Raheem Mostert, maybe. You never know.
You know what, Jen? You know who else it might be a little bit more exciting for? Tevin Coleman. Another guy who I've drafted, not an exciting player, but hey, you're going to take down one of the wide receivers. Okay, sure. Now I'll draft him. I think he has a little bit more standalone value now early on in the season. So think of it like this, Jen, because again, and I've said this before, I don't play fantasy sports to trade. I play fantasy sports to win. However, in this situation, if I have a few shares of Tevin Coleman, he does well, but I'm set at running back. All of a sudden, one of my other league mates has a need to fill at running back. I get myself a nice receiver for a guy like Tevin Coleman. I can use that value to my advantage even before Deebo Samuel comes back.
Just so much. There's so many layers to this game. That's what makes it so much fun, guys. There's so much strategy depending what level you play at. If you play with casual fans, if you play with experts, there's so many different ways to win. I also never drafted the idea to trade. I know some people, especially in baseball, they do the strategy where they draft all steals and saves because those are the two categories that are hardest to get. And then they just use them like trading chips throughout the season. You could always try that as a strategy one time.
Or you could go after Taylor Rogers and Ken Giles in the 9th and 10th round and be all set.
Oh, I love that. That's music to my ears, Justin Fensterman. Justin's been doing an amazing job of doing the mock draft army at least once a week. He is determined to win a fantasy baseball championship. Adam Ronis and I have been coaching him as well by basically tearing apart his drafts every week to the point that he's gotten so good we can't actually tear them up anymore. And now maybe we're a little jealous.
And you know why I became good, Jen? Because for the first half, and I did about 16 mock baseball drafts. For the first half, so for the first 8 to 10, I didn't use any rankings. I wanted to see what information I can ascertain from many shows that we have on Fantasy Farm, on the radio and on the site and the articles, but I didn't use rankings. Then the last few, I started using, in particular, Adam Ronis's rankings. And Jen, you couldn't touch my mock draft, the last one I was in earlier in June. That's because I was using Adam Ronis's rankings. You want someone that has the heart of a lion, that even when he's not going to win the championship, he's going to do everything he can to not be in last place, to place himself in a nice area in the standings, just because he's got that competitive fire. That's the heart of the lion. That is the lion I want to follow right into the jungle and come out on top as king of the jungle.
You guys definitely check out Adam Ronis's rankings. I played in leagues with Adam Ronis. He is a fierce competitor. Sometimes he beats me. Sometimes I beat him. But that's what makes it fun. And it's always good. It's always good to know that you have someone like Adam Ronis's rankings right there that you can look up. You can take it with you into your draft. I can't let this live stream end without talking about NBA because NBA is Finsty's heart. And it's coming back, baby. It's coming back. It's coming back in Bubble World. And I read the whole plan that they have, and I think it's freaking awesome. It makes me excited about NBA. Of course, I want to know what you think. I also want to know, as someone who's really new to NBA, I don't know a lot. I asked John and Pimba for some advice last week. I want some of your advice. How can I get started doing a little wagering on NBA? Because I want to feel involved. And I feel like when I put a little money on the line or when I play a little bit, I mean, obviously I'm not going to start up a fantasy league right now, but what can I do to kind of get even more attached to the game and have some more, emotional investment in the NBA playoffs?
I mean, especially if there's a way that you can find a way to wager on player props. I love that. That's actually one of my
favorite things. That's what John said.
Yep. I mean, it's so much fun. Player props are excellent. And especially in the playoffs, Jen, you'll be in an advantageous position because these series are 7-game series. Maybe at first what you do is you start observing the teams that you know are going to be in the thick of it. You're going to be looking at teams like the Clippers and the Lakers, the Bucks, the Raptors, and John and Pemba's Celtics as well, that you know can at least go one round. That way, in the first round, once you hit game 2 of their first series in their respective series, then you can start to see the lay of the land, because the problem is by the time you hit to game 3, game 4, the props will essentially update and make it a little bit harder for you. So if for someone like you, because Jen, you know me, I eat, sleep, and breathe this sport. So I'm going to try to watch every single minute of every single game if I can, if that's even possible. But for you, it's very telling what these 8 games will be. That will be a nice training ground for you. And then what you'll do is once you get to the series and you'll see how many points the opposing teams led up to those higher teams in the seedings, then by game 2, and I think game 2 is essentially your money spot where you're going to start betting your player props, because they won't be too unfair yet. They're still kind of trying to gauge Vegas. So I think by game 2, you'll be able to know exactly what you're dealing with in the individual matchups. Jen, if there's one thing that I can teach you when it comes to watching the sport of basketball. There's a difference between screen setters and scorers. There are players out there that aren't going to get a lot of shots, that are there just to set screens to set up the other scorers on the team. You target a few teams and you watch a few of those teams, you'll be able to identify who is who very, very quickly.
Awesome. I love it. And I think that, are you on board with this bubble? Do you think it's a good plan? Do you think they got it figured out? Because I looked at it and I was impressed. I was impressed with the NBA. They're really thinking about other things. Of course, there are things that could, possibly go a little wrong, but they really put their best foot forward. I wish MLB could take a little lesson from NBA.
I mean, for the start, it's at Disney World, so it's the happiest place on earth. One of my personal favorite places on earth as well. So to start there, that's great. And they will have amenities there. And they do have plans in case there is an emergency and excused absences. The one thing that I fear is with this hotline that they have, this essentially, that's the one thing, because if you have, let's just say, a player with bad intentions trying to take a star player from his team off this game, what's stopping him from calling the hotline and accusing Kawhi Leonard of leaving the campus and stuff like that? So I think that if I get where the NBA is coming from, they have to have some security measures, but they need to make sure that they have a big investigative plan and they're not just going off an anonymous tip from another player of an opposing team. Because when it comes to sports, it's not about just the physical aspect. It's about the mental one too. And with everybody already paranoid because they don't want to get COVID-19, even in the bubble, an anonymous tip that could definitely throw a star player off on a team, and that could trickle down and throw off the chemistry of the team entirely. So they better have a plan to investigate and not just run with a report from an anonymous tip.
All right. So Fensterman says, check out that hotline, guys. Be sure you have a plan, not to just run on an anonymous tip. It'll be interesting. And wouldn't it be cool? Like, you know how they have those TV shows, they have like 911 calls. If like after the season, they had a documentary of like all the anonymous tip calls, it would be hilarious. But we'll see. So guys, if you're an NBA player and you're watching this, because obviously you are, be sure you always wash your hands and follow all the rules so that no one can call you out. And maybe always have a buddy with you 6 feet away.
The buddy system. I like that.
I think you have a buddy. Like, didn't we do that in camp and stuff? Like, you always had a buddy.
Yes, and especially in the movie Heavyweights. Buddy!
Well, guys, this has been so much fun as usual. We had so many more things we could talk about, but we're going to wrap it up for today so that we have more things to talk about tomorrow at 11 p.m. to 1 a.m. Eastern Time on Alarm After Hours on SiriusXM. Tune in, catch Justin Fensterman and I on Alarm After Hours. And by the way, if you're not already following Fantasy Alarm on Twitter, on Facebook, on YouTube, and even on Twitch, then what the heck is wrong with you? I don't even know what to do with you. You're sick in the head. Get it right. Follow us everywhere you can. We've got great info for you all the time. Justin, thanks so much for being with me today.
Sis, it was fun as always.
As always. What's up, FA Nation? We will catch you next time.